My family poisoned my wedding cake. Then the federal judge revealed I was her daughter. The first bite of her own wedding cake sent fire through Maya Chen's throat. As she doubled over, gasping for air while her new husband James frantically called for an ambulance, she caught a glimpse of her stepmother Patricia's satisfied smirk across the reception hall. The woman who had raised her since age 7, who had insisted on handling all the wedding preparations, who had fought tooth and nail to choose the caterer, was now watching Maya's collapse with cold satisfaction rather than concern. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The paramedics arrived within minutes, but those minutes stretched into eternity as Maya's airway continued to constrict. Around her, 300 wedding guests stood frozen in horror, champagne glasses abandoned on tables draped in ivory silk. The string quartet had stopped playing. The photographer had lowered his camera. Even the children had gone silent. Severe allergic reaction, the EMT announced, preparing an epinephrine injection. What did she eat? Just the wedding cake, James said, his voice breaking. She's not allergic to anything. We've been together for 4 years. But Maya knew better. As the medicine coursed through her system and her breathing slowly normalized, one thought pounded through her mind with crystal clarity. This wasn't an accident. Someone had deliberately put something in that cake, something they knew would nearly kill her, and she had a terrible suspicion about who it was. Maya Chen had spent 26 years believing she understood her family's dynamics. Patricia Chen, her father's second wife, had always been distant, favoring her biological daughter Sophia over Maya in subtle but consistent ways. Maya's father, David, a successful orthopedic surgeon, had seemed oblivious to the preferential treatment, or perhaps had chosen to ignore it for the sake of family harmony. Maya had learned early to keep her head down, excel in school, and avoid giving Patricia any reason to make her life more difficult. The pattern had been established almost immediately after Patricia entered their lives. Maya's mother had died in a car accident when Maya was 6, leaving David devastated and struggling to raise his daughter alone. Patricia had appeared like a savior, a pediatric nurse with a 3-year-old daughter of her own, offering comfort and stability during their darkest time. The wedding had happened quickly, within 18 months of Maya's mother's death, and suddenly Maya found herself with a new mother and sister. But Patricia's warmth had evaporated the moment the honeymoon ended. The woman who had been patient and loving during the courtship became critical and cold toward Maya. Forgotten lunches became frequent. School events were missed due to sudden scheduling conflicts. Birthday celebrations became smaller and less enthusiastic, while Sophia's parties grew more elaborate each year. Maya learned to adapt. She became self-sufficient, walking to school when rides weren't available, preparing her own meals when dinner plans excluded her, finding rides to soccer games when transportation was forgotten. Her father, consumed by his demanding medical practice and trying to establish his new marriage, seemed to notice very little of the subtle emotional warfare happening under his own roof. The inequity became more pronounced as the girls grew older. Sophia received a car for her 16th birthday, while Maya was told the family budget couldn't accommodate 2 vehicles. Sophia's college tuition was paid in full, while Maya was encouraged to apply for scholarships and student loans. When Maya graduated valedictorian from high school, Patricia managed to book a conflicting obligation that prevented the family from attending the ceremony. Despite the challenges, Maya thrived academically and professionally. She earned a full scholarship to UCLA and successfully pursued a career in business consulting.
Northwestern University, majored in journalism, and landed a position at the Chicago Tribune immediately after graduation. She rented a small apartment in Lincoln Park, built a circle of close friends, and gradually created distance from the family dynamics that had defined her childhood. Meeting James Morrison had changed everything. The architectural engineer was kind, supportive, and genuinely interested in Maya's aspirations and dreams. He came from a tight-knit family in Milwaukee, and his parents had immediately embraced Maya with the warmth she'd never experienced from Patricia. For the first time in her adult life, Maya began to envision a future where she belonged somewhere completely and unconditionally. The relationship progressed steadily over 4 years. James proposed during a weekend trip to Door County, presenting a vintage sapphire ring that had belonged to his grandmother. Maya said yes without hesitation, finally ready to build the loving family she'd always craved. The engagement announcement had triggered an unexpected response from Patricia. Suddenly, the woman who had been indifferent to Maya's achievements became intensely involved in wedding planning. She insisted on hosting an engagement party at the family home in Wilmette. She volunteered to coordinate with vendors. She offered to contribute significantly to the wedding budget, something that surprised both Maya and her father. "I want to give you the wedding you deserve," Patricia had said during a rare private conversation. "I know things haven't always been easy between us, but you're about to become a wife. This is my chance to show you how much you mean to this family." Maya had been cautiously optimistic. Perhaps marriage would mark a new chapter in our relationship. Perhaps Patricia had genuinely regretted years of distant treatment and was ready to build a real connection. Maya allowed herself to hope that her wedding day would finally bring the maternal support she'd always longed for. The planning process had seemed to confirm this hope. Patricia threw herself into every detail with enthusiasm that felt genuine. She researched venues, interviewed photographers, and spent hours reviewing catering options. When Maya expressed interest in a particular florist, Patricia made it happen. When Maya fell in love with a dress slightly outside their budget, Patricia offered to cover the difference. "I want everything to be perfect for you," Patricia had insisted, and Maya had begun to believe her. The one area where Patricia remained inflexible was the wedding cake. She had strong opinions about the bakery, insisting on a high-end patisserie in downtown Chicago that specialized in European-style confections. Maya had preferred a smaller, local baker whose samples she'd loved, but Patricia had been surprisingly adamant. "Delacroix Patisserie has been making wedding cakes for Chicago society families for decades," Patricia had argued. "Their reputation is impeccable. This is a once-in-a-lifetime event, Maya. We should have the very best." Maya had eventually agreed, touched by Patricia's investment in making the day special. The wedding tasting had been scheduled on a day when Maya had a work emergency and couldn't attend. Patricia and Sophia had gone without her, selecting an elaborate 4-tier creation with vanilla bean cake, raspberry filling, and Swiss buttercream frosting. "It's going to be stunning," Patricia had assured her. "Trust me, you'll love it." In retrospect, Maya realized she should have been more suspicious of Patricia's sudden devotion to wedding planning. The woman who had missed Maya's high school graduation had somehow cleared her calendar for dozens of vendor meetings. The stepmother who had forgotten Maya's birthday multiple times was now remembering minute details about table linens and centerpiece heights. But Maya had been too happy, too caught up in the joy of marrying James and the hope of finally having the family celebration she'd always dreamed of.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Maternal instincts. Assuming that Patricia had simply needed time to warm up to her role as Maya's mother figure. The wedding day had dawned bright and clear, a perfect September morning with crisp air and brilliant sunshine. Maya had woken in the bridal suite at the Palmer House Hotel, surrounded by her bridesmaids and filled with anticipation. James's sister had done her hair while her college roommate handled makeup. Everything felt magical and right. The ceremony at Fourth Presbyterian Church had been everything Maya had hoped for. James had tears in his eyes as she walked down the aisle. Her father had seemed genuinely proud as he gave her away. Even Patricia had appeared emotional during the vows, dabbing at her eyes with an embroidered handkerchief. The reception at the Chicago History Museum had been elegant and joyful. The flowers were perfect, the music was exactly what they'd requested, and the guests seemed genuinely happy to celebrate their union. Maya had danced with her father, laughed with her friends, and felt more content than she could ever remember feeling. The cake-cutting ceremony had been scheduled for 9 o'clock, after dinner but before the dancing resumed in earnest. Maya and James had posed for photos while the photographer captured the traditional moments. Patricia had stood nearby, beaming with apparent pride, as Maya lifted the silver knife. "Make a wish," James had whispered in her ear, and Maya had closed her eyes briefly, wishing for a lifetime of happiness with the man she loved. They had cut the first slice together, James's hand covering hers on the knife handle. The cake looked beautiful. The layers perfectly aligned, the buttercream frosting smooth and pristine. Maya had taken the first bite,
savoring what should have been a sweet moment of celebration. Instead, she had tasted something bitter and chemical beneath the vanilla and raspberry flavors. Her throat had begun to burn immediately, and within seconds, she could barely breathe. As she collapsed, fighting for air, she had seen Patricia's face in the crowd of concerned guests. While everyone else looked horrified and panicked, Patricia had looked satisfied, as if watching the conclusion of a plan that had gone exactly as intended. The ambulance ride to Northwestern Memorial Hospital had been a blur of oxygen masks and IV lines. James had held her hand while paramedics monitored her vital signs and radioed ahead to the emergency department. Maya's throat had remained swollen and painful, but the epinephrine had prevented the reaction from becoming fatal. At the hospital, emergency room doctors had run blood tests and taken a thorough medical history. Maya had insisted she had no known allergies, had eaten nothing unusual except the wedding cake, and had never experienced anything like this reaction before. The attending physician had been puzzled but thorough, admitting Maya for overnight observation and further testing. James had stayed by her bedside through the night, still wearing his wedding tuxedo, holding her hand while she drifted in and out of sedated sleep. When she woke the next morning, her throat felt raw but functional, and her breathing had returned to normal. The relief of surviving was quickly replaced by a burning need to understand what had happened. Dr. Sarah Kim, the attending allergist, had entered Maya's room with test results and a concerned expression. "We've identified the cause of your reaction," she had said, consulting her tablet. "Your blood work shows elevated levels of shellfish proteins, specifically from crab. Were you aware of any shellfish allergy?" Maya had shaken her head. "I've eaten shellfish many times. I had crab cakes at my engagement party just 6 months ago." "Adult-onset allergies can develop suddenly," Dr. Kim had explained, "but the levels in your system suggest exposure to a concentrated amount, more than what would typically be found in cross-contamination. Can you think of any way shellfish proteins might have been introduced to your food?" The question had hit Maya like a physical blow. She had immediately thought of Patricia's insistence on choosing the bakery, her attendance at the cake tasting without Maya present, her unusual investment in every wedding detail. Maya had shared her suspicions with James, who had been initially skeptical but agreed they needed to investigate further. The conversation with the catering manager had been illuminating. When James had called to inquire about ingredients and preparation methods, the manager had been defensive and confused. "We don't use any shellfish products in our desserts," she had insisted. "Our kitchen has strict protocols to prevent cross-contamination. The wedding cake was prepared in a dedicated pastry kitchen that doesn't handle any seafood." James had pressed for more details. "Is it possible someone could have added ingredients after the cake left your facility?" There had been a long pause. "The cake was delivered and set up 3 hours before the reception. Family members had access to the display area during that time. We don't monitor the cake constantly once it's in position." The implication had been clear. Someone had deliberately contaminated the wedding cake with shellfish proteins, knowing it would cause Maya to have a severe allergic reaction. Someone who had access to the reception venue, who knew about Maya's recent positive response to shellfish at the engagement party, and who might have assumed the reaction would be more severe than it actually was. Maya had spent her first night as a married woman in a hospital bed, coming to terms with the fact that someone in her family had tried to seriously harm her on what should have been the happiest day of her life. The betrayal cut deeper than the physical pain of the allergic reaction. This wasn't passive neglect or subtle favoritism. This was an active attempt to sabotage her wedding and potentially endanger her life. When Patricia and David had visited the hospital the next morning, Maya had watched her stepmother's face carefully. Patricia had expressed appropriate concern and shock, but something in her eyes had seemed calculating rather than genuinely worried. She had asked detailed questions about Maya's symptoms and treatment, as if gathering information rather than offering support. "Thank goodness it wasn't more serious," Patricia had said, but her tone had suggested disappointment rather than relief. Maya had made a decision in that hospital room. She was done trying to earn Patricia's love and acceptance. She was done making excuses for the woman's behavior and hoping for change.
Most importantly, she was done putting herself in situations where Patricia could hurt her. The revelation had marked the end of Maya's attempts to maintain family harmony. As she signed her discharge papers and prepared to leave the hospital with James, she knew she was also leaving behind any illusion that Patricia would ever truly accept her as a daughter. The wedding cake incident had revealed the depth of Patricia's animosity, and Maya finally understood that no amount of success, kindness, or accommodation would ever be enough. But Maya had also discovered something else in that hospital room. She had survived Patricia's worst attempt to sabotage her happiness, and she had James by her side, unwavering in his support and love. Whatever came next, she no longer had to face Patricia's manipulations alone. For the first time in her life, Maya had someone who was completely and unquestionably on her side. The fight that was coming would be ugly and painful, but Maya was ready for it. Patricia had finally shown her true colors, and Maya was done pretending she hadn't seen them. The wedding cake had been intended as Maya's destruction, but instead it had become her liberation. James had squeezed her hand as they walked out of the hospital together, wedding rings still gleaming on their fingers despite everything that had happened. "Whatever you want to do next, I'm with you completely," he had said quietly. Maya had looked back at the building where she'd spent her wedding night, and then forward at the street leading
Away from the hospital and toward their real life together. She had survived Patricia's worst, and now she was going to build something beautiful from the wreckage. The war was just beginning, but for the first time, Maya felt like she might actually win. The confrontation Maya had been dreading came exactly 1 week after the hospital discharge. Patricia arrived at Maya and James' Lincoln Park apartment unannounced, using the key Maya had given her years earlier for emergencies. Maya was working from home, editing an investigative piece about municipal corruption, when she heard the familiar sound of Patricia's heels clicking across the hardwood floor. "We need to talk," Patricia announced, settling herself on the living room sofa as if she owned the place. She wore a navy blazer and pearls, her blonde hair perfectly styled, looking every inch the respected doctor's wife she'd cultivated herself to be over the years. Maya saved her work and closed her laptop slowly, buying herself time to prepare for whatever manipulation was coming. She'd spent the week researching adult-onset allergies and consulting with specialists, building a case that she hoped would never need to be presented in court. But she'd also been preparing for this conversation, knowing Patricia wouldn't be able to resist the opportunity to gauge how much Maya suspected. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" Patricia's voice dripped with false concern. "You gave us such a scare at the wedding." "Did I?" Maya kept her tone neutral, settling into the armchair across from Patricia rather than beside her on the sofa. The distance felt symbolic and necessary. Patricia's eyes flickered with something that might have been annoyance. "Of course you did. We were all terrified when you collapsed like that. Thank goodness it was just an allergic reaction and nothing more serious." "Just an allergic reaction," Maya repeated, "to shellfish that somehow made its way into a cake that was supposed to contain only vanilla, raspberry, and buttercream ingredients." "These things happen," Patricia said smoothly. "Cross-contamination in commercial kitchens is more common than people realize. You really should have disclosed your allergy to the caterers." Maya felt a cold rage building in her chest. Patricia's performance was flawless, each word calculated to sound reasonable, while subtly shifting blame onto Maya herself. It was the same technique Patricia had used throughout Maya's childhood, making Maya question her own perceptions and reactions. "I didn't have a shellfish allergy," Maya said carefully. "I ate crab cakes at our engagement party. You were there. You saw me eat them." "Allergies can develop suddenly," Patricia replied, echoing the doctor's explanation, but somehow making it sound accusatory. "Perhaps you should have been more careful about what you consumed on such an important day." The gaslighting was so blatant, so perfectly executed, that Maya almost admired Patricia's skill. Almost. But she was no longer the confused, desperate for approval child she'd once been. She was a trained journalist with years of experience recognizing when people were lying to her face.
You chose the bakery. You insisted on it, actually. You went to the cake tasting without me. You had access to the cake for 3 hours before the reception. Patricia's facade slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. Are you suggesting I had something to do with your accident? That's a very serious accusation, Maya. Is it an accusation? I'm just stating facts. You're being paranoid and ungrateful. Patricia's voice hardened. I spent months planning your wedding, trying to give you something beautiful, and this is how you repay me? By inventing conspiracy theories? Maya leaned forward slightly. Why did you spend months planning my wedding, Patricia? You missed my high school graduation. You forgot my birthday 3 years running. You've never shown interest in any other significant event in my life. Why was my wedding suddenly so important to you? The question hung in the air between them. Patricia's mask had slipped further,
revealing something ugly underneath the practiced concern. Maya could see her stepmother calculating, weighing how much to reveal, how much to deny. I was trying to be a good mother to you, Patricia said finally, but the words sounded hollow. No, Maya said quietly. You weren't. You were trying to ruin the happiest day of my life. The question is why? Patricia stood abruptly, smoothing her skirt with hands that trembled slightly. I don't have to listen to these ridiculous accusations. You're clearly still confused from your medical episode. My medical episode, Maya repeated. Is that what we're calling attempted poisoning now? The words hung in the air like a challenge. Patricia's face went white, then flushed red. For a moment, Maya thought she might actually confess, might finally drop the pretense and reveal whatever twisted motivation had driven her to such extremes. Instead, Patricia gathered her purse and moved toward the door. I came here to check on your well-being and offer support. I can see that was a mistake. When you're ready to apologize for these hurtful accusations, you know where to find me. I won't be apologizing, Maya said, following Patricia to the door, and I won't be coming to find you. I think we're done here, Patricia. After 20 years, we're finally done. Patricia paused with her hand on the doorknob. You'll regret this, Maya. Family is all you have in the end. You're not my family, Maya said, and she felt a weight lifting from her shoulders as she spoke the words aloud for the first time. You never were. After Patricia left, Maya double-locked the door and called James at his office. She needed to hear his voice, needed the reassurance that she hadn't imagined the entire confrontation. When she recounted the conversation, James was quiet for a long moment. She didn't deny it, he said finally. No, she didn't. She deflected and manipulated and tried to make me doubt myself, but she never actually denied putting shellfish in the cake. What do you want to do? Maya looked around their apartment, at the wedding photos they'd finally had developed, at the life they were building together. I want to disappear from their lives completely. I want to build something so far removed from their toxicity that they can't touch it. Then that's what we'll do. The process of separating from Patricia and David proved more complicated than Maya had anticipated. Her father called repeatedly, demanding to know why she was making trouble for Patricia. Sophia sent manipulative text messages, alternating between guilt trips and threats. Extended family members who had only heard Patricia's version of events began calling to lecture Maya about family loyalty and forgiveness. Maya's approach was systematic and thorough. She changed the locks on their apartment and installed a security system. She blocked Patricia and Sophia on all social media platforms and had their phone numbers redirected to voicemail. She informed her building's doorman that Patricia was no longer welcome and should not be granted access under any circumstances. Most importantly, she began documenting everything. Every voicemail Patricia left, every manipulative text from Sophia, every conversation with family members who tried to pressure her into reconciliation. Maya's journalistic training served her well as she built a comprehensive record of the family's behavior patterns. records, and interviews, Robert's brother agreed to speak with her, revealing that Patricia had been having financial difficulties before Robert's death and had recently increased his life insurance coverage. More disturbing, Robert had apparently been planning to leave Patricia, having discovered she'd been having an affair. The whole thing stank, Robert's brother told Maya over the phone, but Patricia had an alibi. She was at the hotel spa when Robert supposedly fell off the boat. No one could prove anything, and she had Sophia to think about, so the family eventually dropped it. Maya felt sick as the pieces fell into place. Patricia had potentially killed her first husband for insurance money, then targeted David as her next mark. Maya had been an inconvenient reminder of David's first wife, an obstacle to Patricia's complete control over the family narrative and resources. But Maya needed more than suspicions and coincidences. She needed proof, and she knew exactly where to find it. The wedding cake incident had been Patricia's mistake, her first attempt to harm Maya that left tangible evidence. Maya contacted the best criminal defense attorney in Chicago, Rachel Morrison, who happened to be James's aunt. Rachel listened to Maya's story with professional detachment, taking notes and asking pointed questions. When Maya finished, Rachel was quiet for several minutes, reviewing her notes. "You have enough for a police report," Rachel said finally. "The timing, the access, the lack of any other explanation for shellfish proteins in a cake that shouldn't have contained them. Whether the prosecutor would file charges is another question." "I don't necessarily want her arrested," Maya said. "I want her out of my life permanently, and I want to protect my father and anyone else she might target. A restraining order might be possible, but you'd need to prove imminent threat. What you're describing is sophisticated manipulation and possibly attempted poisoning, but Patricia is careful. She's left herself plausible deniability." Maya felt frustrated but not defeated. If the legal system couldn't protect her, she'd have to protect herself through other means. She began researching Patricia's social and professional connections, looking for vulnerabilities that might force Patricia to leave Maya alone. The solution came from an unexpected source. Maya's editor at the Tribune assigned her to cover a charity gala hosted by Northwestern Memorial Hospital, the same hospital where Maya had been treated after the wedding cake incident. The event was raising money for a new pediatric wing, and Patricia would undoubtedly be there in her capacity as a prominent doctor's wife. Maya attended the gala with James, wearing a stunning emerald dress that photographed beautifully. She positioned herself strategically, ensuring she'd be visible in any photos taken of the event's prominent attendees. When the society photographer approached, Maya made sure to mention her recent marriage and her work at the Tribune. The photos appeared in the Tribune's Society section the following Sunday, showing Maya and James looking radiant and successful at the high-profile charity event. The caption identified Maya as an investigative journalist and noted her recent marriage to prominent architect James Morrison. The message was subtle but clear. Maya was connected, successful, and working in a profession that specialized in exposing corruption and secrets. She wasn't an isolated target anymore, and any attempt to harm her would bring unwanted scrutiny to Patricia's carefully constructed life. Patricia's response was swift and predictable. She called David, demanding he force Maya to stop embarrassing the family with her attention-seeking behavior. When David called Maya, he sounded tired and confused rather than angry. "Patricia says you're trying to make trouble for her. She's very upset about something that happened at a hospital fundraiser." "I attended a charity gala and had my photo taken. I'm not sure how that constitutes making trouble." "She says you're spreading rumors about her, trying to damage her reputation in the community." Maya felt a moment of pity for her father. He'd been so focused on his medical practice and so grateful for Patricia's management of family life that he'd never seen what was happening right in front of him. But his willful blindness had enabled Patricia's behavior for nearly 20 years, and Maya was no longer willing to protect him from the consequences. "Dad, I need to ask you something, and I need you to really think about your answer. In all the years you've known Patricia, has she ever shown genuine affection or concern for me? Not performed concern, not public displays of motherly behavior, but actual private moments of care?" The silence stretched so long that Maya wondered if the call had dropped. When David finally spoke, his voice was quiet and uncertain. "She's always said she was trying to help you become more independent and self-sufficient." "That's not what I asked." Another long pause. "I thought she was doing her best with a difficult situation. You were grieving your mother, and Patricia was trying to blend two families. For 20 years? Maya, what are you really asking me?" Maya closed her eyes, knowing this conversation would change everything between them. "I'm asking if you've ever noticed that Patricia treats me differently than she treats Sophia. I'm asking if you've ever wondered why I stopped coming to family dinners or why I moved out the day I turned 18. I'm asking if you've ever questioned why the daughter who used to follow you around the hospital when you did weekend rounds suddenly couldn't wait to get away from home." The silence this time was different, heavier. Maya could almost hear her father's mental wheels turning, reviewing years of family interactions through a new lens. "She said you were naturally distant," he said finally, "that some children have trouble bonding with step-parents. Did you ever ask me if that was true?" David's voice trailed off. "I assumed if there were serious problems, you would have told me. I was a child, Dad. I was supposed to tell my grieving father that his new wife was making my life miserable? I was supposed to ask you to choose between me and your chance at happiness?" Maya heard her father's sharp intake of breath and knew her words had hit their target. For the first time in 20 years, David was being forced to confront the possibility that his second marriage had come at his daughter's expense. "Maya, if what you're suggesting is true, then what, Dad? What would you do if you knew Patricia had spent 20 years systematically pushing me out of the family? What would you do if you knew she'd been lying to you about who I am and what I want?" "I would—" David stopped, apparently unable to finish the sentence. "You would do what you've always done," Maya said gently. "You'd find a way to make it not be true because the alternative is too painful to accept. That's not fair. None of this has been fair, Dad. But I'm done pretending it doesn't matter. I'm done making myself smaller so Patricia can feel more important. I'm done sacrificing my relationship with you to keep peace in a house I don't even live in anymore." After that conversation, Maya heard nothing from her father for 3 weeks. She assumed he was either discussing the situation with Patricia or choosing to pretend the conversation had never happened. Either way, Maya felt relieved to have finally spoken her truth, even if it cost her the last remaining connection to her childhood family. The respite ended when Sophia appeared at Maya's office building, intercepting her in the lobby after work. Maya's half-sister looked agitated and angry, her usually perfect appearance slightly disheveled. "You need to stop. Whatever game you're playing, whatever point you're trying to make, you need to stop." Maya signed out with building security and headed toward the exit, not surprised when Sophia followed. "I'm not playing any games, Sophia. I'm living my life." "You're hurting Mom. She's been crying for weeks, telling Dad that you're trying to destroy the family." Maya paused on the sidewalk outside.
Sophia was 23, beautiful, and had never wanted for anything in her life. She'd grown up secure in Patricia's love and David's financial support, oblivious to the different reality Maya had experienced in the same household. "Has it ever occurred to you to wonder why I might want to destroy the family?" "Because you're jealous," Sophia replied immediately. "You've always been jealous that Mom chose me over you." The words hit Maya like a slap, not because they were true, but because they revealed how completely Patricia had poisoned Sophia's understanding of their family dynamics. In Patricia's version of events, Maya was the aggressor, the jealous stepdaughter who couldn't accept her place in the family hierarchy. "Is that really what you think happened?" Maya asked. "That your mother chose you over me? It's obvious, isn't it? You're bitter and resentful because you know Mom loves me more." Maya felt a wave of sadness for Sophia, who had been raised to believe that love was a competition with winners and losers. Patricia had damaged both of them, just in different ways. "Sophia, what if I told you that your mother never gave me the chance to earn her love? What if I told you that she decided to hate me before she even met me, simply because I reminded her that your father had loved someone before her?"
That's ridiculous. Mom tried with you for years. You were just too stubborn and difficult to appreciate what she was offering. Maya realized that Sophia genuinely believed what she was saying. Patricia had constructed such a convincing narrative that even Sophia, who had witnessed years of preferential treatment, couldn't see the truth of what had happened. "What exactly did your mother tell you about the wedding cake incident?" Maya asked. Sophia's expression shifted slightly, becoming less certain. "She said you had an allergic reaction and then tried to blame the family for it. She said you were looking for attention and sympathy. Did she mention that I've never been allergic to shellfish before? Did she tell you that the cake somehow contained crab proteins, despite being made in a shellfish-free kitchen? Did she explain how those proteins got there?" "Accidents happen," Sophia said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Do they? Your mother insisted on choosing the bakery. She went to the cake tasting without me. She had access to the cake for hours before the reception. She's the only person who had both opportunity and motive to contaminate it." Maya watched Sophia's face as the implications sank in. For a moment, uncertainty flickered in her eyes, and Maya thought she might finally be seeing through Patricia's manipulation. But then Sophia's expression hardened again. "You're sick," she said. "You're actually trying to convince me that my own mother attempted to poison you? You need help, Maya." Maya realized that Sophia would never be able to see the truth, not while she remained dependent on Patricia for her identity and self-worth. Patricia had raised Sophia to be an extension of herself, incapable of independent thought or moral judgment. "You're right," Maya said. "I do need help. I need help staying away from people who would rather believe comfortable lies than difficult truths. I need help protecting myself from a family that's never protected me." She turned to walk away, but Sophia grabbed her arm. "If you don't stop making trouble, you'll regret it," she said, her voice low and threatening. "Mom has more power than you realize." Maya looked down at Sophia's hand on her arm, then back up at her half-sister's face. The threat was clear, and Maya realized that Sophia had become Patricia's willing accomplice in whatever campaign they were planning. "Let go of me," Maya said quietly. Sophia released her arm but didn't step back. "I'm serious, Maya. Back off." "Or what? You'll poison my food too?" The words slipped out before Maya could stop them, and Sophia's face went pale. For just a moment, there was something in Sophia's expression that looked like guilt or fear, and Maya knew she'd struck closer to the truth than she'd intended. "You're crazy," Sophia whispered, but she was backing away now, putting distance between them. Maya watched her half-sister hurry toward the parking garage and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the October evening air. The threat hadn't been idle posturing. Sophia knew something about the wedding cake incident, and her reaction suggested that Patricia's plans for Maya might not be finished. That night, Maya told James about the encounter with Sophia. He listened with growing concern, particularly when Maya described the threat and Sophia's reaction to the poisoning accusation. "We need to take this seriously," James said. "If Patricia is planning something else, if Sophia is helping her, you could be in real danger." "I know," Maya said, "but I don't know how to protect myself from something I can't predict or prove." James was quiet for a moment, then pulled out his phone. "I'm calling Rachel. If they're escalating, we need legal protection." The conversation with Rachel Morrison was sobering. The attorney listened to Maya's account of the confrontation with Sophia, asking detailed questions about the exact words used and the context of the threats. "The threat itself might be enough for a restraining order," Rachel said, "especially combined with the wedding cake incident and the pattern of harassment you've documented. But you need to understand that a piece of paper won't stop someone who's determined to hurt you." "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting you consider that Patricia may be more dangerous than you've realized. If she was willing to poison your wedding cake, if she potentially killed her first husband, she's not going to be deterred by legal boundaries." Maya felt the walls of her carefully constructed new life closing in around her. She'd thought that cutting contact with Patricia would be enough, that building a successful career and happy marriage would insulate her from further attacks. But Patricia wasn't the type of person who accepted defeat gracefully. "What would you do in my position?" Maya asked. "I'd disappear," Rachel said, without hesitation. "I'd take my husband and move somewhere Patricia couldn't find me. I'd start over completely, with new identities if necessary. The suggestion was both appealing and terrifying. Maya had worked hard to build her career at the Tribune, and James had his own architectural practice to consider. Starting over would mean abandoning everything they'd worked for, but staying might mean risking their lives. "How long would we have to hide?" James asked. "Until Patricia found a new target or eliminated herself from the equation. People like her don't usually stop until they're forced to stop." Maya spent the next week researching Patricia more thoroughly, using every investigative technique she'd learned as a journalist. What she discovered painted a picture of a woman who had built her entire life on manipulation and strategic relationships. Patricia had grown up in poverty in rural Illinois, the daughter of an alcoholic father and absent mother. She'd put herself through nursing school, then systematically targeted wealthy men as potential husbands. Robert Walsh had been her first success, a wealthy contractor who'd provided her with financial security and social status. When Robert had threatened to leave her, Patricia had eliminated the problem permanently. The insurance money had allowed her to relocate to Chicago and reinvent herself as a grieving young widow with a small daughter to support. David had been the perfect second target, a successful doctor devastated by loss and grateful for Patricia's apparent strength and stability. Maya realized that she had never been Patricia's primary target. David's money and status had been the real prize. But Maya's presence had been a constant reminder that Patricia was second choice, a replacement rather than David's first love. Over the years, that resentment had grown into something darker and more dangerous. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when Maya discovered that David
Recently updated his will, leaving everything to Patricia with only a modest trust fund for Maya. If something happened to Maya, Patricia would inherit David's entire estate without having to share with an inconvenient stepdaughter. The wedding cake incident hadn't been about ruining Maya's wedding day. It had been a test run, a way for Patricia to see if she could eliminate Maya without arousing suspicion. The fact that Maya had survived and was asking questions had probably convinced Patricia that more direct action was necessary. Maya showed her research to James and Rachel, watching their faces grow grim as they reviewed the evidence she'd assembled. When she finished her presentation, the room was silent for several minutes. "You need to go to the police," Rachel said finally. "This isn't just harassment anymore. This is a credible threat to your life." "With what proof?" Maya asked. "Everything I've found is circumstantial. Patricia is too smart to leave evidence lying around." "Then you need to make her," James said quietly. Both women turned to look at him. "What do you mean?" Maya asked. "You need to make her reveal herself. Force her into a situation where she has to show her true nature to witnesses who can't be dismissed or manipulated." Maya felt a chill of fear and excitement. "You're talking about setting a trap." "I'm talking about giving her enough rope to hang herself," James replied. "Patricia's weakness is her ego. She thinks she's smarter than everyone around her, that she can manipulate any situation to her advantage. If we can create a scenario where she feels safe enough to drop her mask, we might finally get the proof we need." Rachel looked skeptical. "That's incredibly dangerous. If Patricia is as unstable as we think she is, provoking her could backfire catastrophically." "More catastrophically than waiting for her to make another attempt on Maya's life?" James asked. Maya considered the options, weighing the risks against the potential rewards. Living in fear wasn't sustainable, and running away felt like admitting defeat. But actively confronting Patricia required a level of courage Maya wasn't sure she possessed. "What kind of trap are you thinking about?" she asked James. "Something public enough that she can't harm you directly, but private enough that she feels comfortable being honest. Something that plays to her vanity and her need to prove she's superior to you." Maya's mind began working through possibilities, drawing on her understanding of Patricia's psychological profile and her experience staging interviews for difficult subjects. "A family reconciliation," she said slowly. "Something that makes her think she's won, that I'm finally surrendering to her authority." "That could work," Rachel said reluctantly. "If it's properly staged and documented, if there are reliable witnesses, it might give us what we need."
Maya felt her heart racing as the plan began to take shape in her mind. It would be dangerous, possibly foolish, but it might be their only chance to end Patricia's reign of terror permanently. And after 20 years of being Patricia's victim, Maya was ready to become the hunter instead of the hunted. The plan Maya devised was elegant in its simplicity. She would invite Patricia and David to dinner at an upscale restaurant in downtown Chicago, ostensibly to apologize for her accusations and attempt reconciliation. The location would be public enough to ensure her safety, but private enough for Patricia to feel comfortable dropping her guard. James would be present as a witness, along with a carefully positioned recording device that would capture everything Patricia said. Maya chose Le Bernardin, a French restaurant known for its discretion and excellent acoustics. She made reservations for 4 people, requesting a corner table that would provide privacy while remaining visible to other diners. She also arranged for Rachel Morrison to be dining at a nearby table, within earshot, but not obviously connected to their party. The invitation itself was a masterpiece of psychological manipulation. Maya crafted a carefully worded email to her father,
expressing regret for her recent behavior and requesting a family dinner to discuss their relationship moving forward. She made sure to sound contrite and vulnerable, playing into Patricia's expectation that Maya would eventually submit to her authority. "I've been thinking about what you said about family being all we have," Maya wrote to her father. "Maybe I've been too stubborn, too willing to hold grudges. Patricia has been part of our family for 20 years, and I owe it to both of you to try harder. Could we have dinner this Friday to talk things through?" David's response was immediate and relieved. He confirmed the dinner and expressed hope that they could put this unpleasantness behind us and move forward as a family. Maya could practically hear Patricia dictating his response, could imagine her stepmother's satisfaction at Maya's apparent surrender. The days leading up to the dinner were tense. Maya rehearsed various scenarios with James and Rachel, preparing for different ways the conversation might unfold. They discussed what kinds of statements would be most damaging to Patricia, what admissions they most needed to capture on recording. "Remember, she's going to try to control the narrative," Rachel warned. "She'll want to position herself as the victim and you as the aggressor. You need to stay calm and let her reveal herself gradually." Maya spent hours studying Patricia's psychological profile, identifying the triggers that might cause her to drop her carefully maintained facade. Patricia's primary weakness was her need to prove her intellectual superiority, particularly over Maya. If Maya could make Patricia feel like she'd outsmarted her, Patricia might be willing to gloat about her past manipulations. Friday evening arrived with unseasonable warmth for late October. Maya dressed carefully in a navy dress that would read as appropriately contrite on camera, while the hidden recording device James had acquired sat nearly invisible beneath her blazer. They arrived at the restaurant early, checking the seating arrangement and ensuring the recording equipment was functioning properly. David and Patricia arrived exactly on time, Patricia elegant in cream-colored silk with her signature pearls. She embraced Maya with what appeared to be genuine warmth, but Maya could feel the calculation in the gesture, the way Patricia positioned them for maximum visibility to other diners. "I'm so glad you called," Patricia said, her voice carrying just the right note of maternal concern. "I've been worried sick about you since our last conversation." David looked genuinely relieved as they took their seats, clearly hoping that Maya's invitation signaled an end to the family discord that had been troubling him for weeks. "This is exactly what we needed," he said, raising his water glass in a toast, "to family and to moving forward together." Maya played her role perfectly, appearing subdued and apologetic as she thanked them for coming. She ordered modestly, declined wine, and generally projected the image of someone who had been chastened by recent events and was ready to submit to family harmony. Patricia was clearly enjoying Maya's apparent contrition. As the appetizers arrived, she launched into a monologue about the importance of family loyalty and forgiveness, speaking with the authority of someone who believed she had finally achieved victory over a long-standing opponent. "Sometimes we have to go through difficult periods to appreciate what we have," Patricia said, reaching across the table to pat Maya's hand. "I know things have been challenging between us, but I've always believed that love and patience can overcome any obstacle." Maya forced herself to remain still under Patricia's touch, fighting every instinct that screamed at her to pull away.
I've been thinking a lot about our relationship over the years, she said carefully, about the choices we've both made and how they've affected our family. That's very mature of you, Patricia replied, her tone slightly condescending. It takes wisdom to recognize when we've been in the wrong. The opening Maya
Been waiting for presented itself naturally. I keep thinking about my wedding day, she said, making her voice waver slightly. About how terrifying it was when I couldn't breathe, how helpless I felt in that hospital bed. Patricia's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, becoming more alert and focused. That must have been very frightening for you, she said. Allergic reactions can be so unpredictable. The doctor said it was shellfish, Maya continued, but I've eaten shellfish before without any problems. I keep wondering how it could have gotten into the wedding cake. Cross-contamination is more common than people realize, Patricia replied smoothly, but Maya caught a glimmer of satisfaction in her eyes. Commercial kitchens handle so many different ingredients. These accidents happen all the time. David looked uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Maybe we shouldn't dwell on unpleasant memories, he suggested. We're here to move forward, not relitigate the past. But Maya pressed on, sensing that Patricia was enjoying the opportunity to discuss her handiwork. I just keep thinking about how careful you were with all the wedding preparations. You checked every detail, made sure everything was perfect. It seems so strange that something like this could slip through. Patricia's smile became more pronounced. I did work very hard to make your wedding special. Every decision was made with your best interests at heart. Even choosing the bakery? Maya asked. You were so insistent about Delacroix patisserie, even though I preferred the local baker. I have more experience with these things. I knew Delacroix would deliver exactly what was needed for the occasion. Maya felt a chill at Patricia's choice of words. What was needed for the occasion could be interpreted in multiple ways, and Patricia's tone suggested she meant something beyond simple cake delivery. Thames, who had been quietly observing the exchange, spoke up for the first time. It's interesting that Maya had such a severe reaction to something she'd never been allergic to before. The timing was incredibly unfortunate. Patricia turned her attention to James, and Maya saw something predatory in her expression. Allergies can develop at any time, she said. Maya was under a lot of stress with the wedding preparations. Stress can make the body react unpredictably to substances it previously tolerated. Is that something you learned in nursing school? James asked innocently. Among other things, Patricia replied. I've seen many cases over the years where patients developed sudden sensitivities to foods they'd eaten safely before. The human body is remarkably adaptable, but also surprisingly fragile. Maya recognized the subtle threat in Patricia's words. She was describing not just medical knowledge, but a methodology for causing harm while maintaining plausible deniability. It must have been so worried when I collapsed, Maya said, watching Patricia's face carefully. It must have been terrifying to watch someone you care about struggling to breathe. For just a moment, Patricia's mask slipped completely. Instead of the maternal concern she'd been projecting, her expression showed something cold and calculating. It was certainly dramatic, she said, and there was unmistakable satisfaction in her voice. The word choice was telling, not frightening or heartbreaking, but dramatic. As if Patricia had been watching a performance rather than witnessing a medical emergency involving someone she claimed to love. David seemed oblivious to the undercurrents of the conversation, focusing on his entree while Patricia and Maya continued their verbal chess match. But Maya could see that James was picking up on every nuance, every subtle revelation of Patricia's true nature. I suppose I should be grateful it wasn't worse, Maya said. The doctor said if I'd consumed more of whatever caused the reaction, or if the paramedics had been delayed, the outcome could have been much more serious. Yes, Patricia agreed, and her tone suggested disappointment rather than relief.
relief. You were very fortunate that help arrived so quickly. Maya decided to push harder, sensing that Patricia was becoming overconfident. Sometimes I wonder if someone wanted to hurt me that day, if someone saw my wedding as an opportunity to cause me harm. The restaurant noise seemed to fade around their table as Patricia considered her response. Maya could see her weighing how much to reveal, how much she could safely admit without exposing herself to consequences. "That's a very serious accusation," Patricia said finally. "Are you suggesting someone deliberately tried to poison you?" "I'm not suggesting anything," Maya replied. "I'm just wondering why someone who's eaten shellfish safely for years would suddenly have a life-threatening reaction to a wedding cake that shouldn't have contained any seafood ingredients." Patricia leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping to a more intimate tone. "Maya, dear, sometimes the universe has its own way of sending us messages. Perhaps your reaction was meant to teach you something about trust, about being more careful who you depend on." The statement was so blatantly threatening that Maya almost gasped. Patricia was essentially admitting to poisoning the cake while framing it as a life lesson. The arrogance was breathtaking. "What kind of message do you think the universe was trying to send me?" Maya asked. "That actions have consequences," Patricia replied. "That when we make choices that hurt the people who love us, sometimes those consequences manifest in unexpected ways." Maya felt James tense beside her, recognizing that Patricia had just confessed to poisoning the wedding cake as punishment for Maya's perceived slights against the family. But Patricia wasn't finished. "Of course, the universe also provides second chances," she continued, "opportunities to learn from our mistakes and make better choices going forward. That's why I was so pleased when you reached out for this dinner. It shows growth, maturity, a willingness to accept guidance from those who know better." The condescension was overwhelming, but Maya forced herself to remain calm. Patricia was essentially admitting to poisoning the cake while framing it as a life lesson. The arrogance was breathtaking. "What kind of message do you think the universe was trying to send me?" Maya asked. "That actions have consequences," Patricia replied. "That when we make choices that hurt the people who love us, sometimes those consequences manifest in unexpected ways." Maya felt James tense beside her, recognizing that Patricia had just confessed to poisoning the wedding cake as punishment for Maya's perceived slights against the family. But Patricia wasn't finished. "Of course, the universe also provides second chances," she continued, "opportunities to learn from our mistakes and make better choices going forward. That's why I was so pleased when you reached out for this dinner. It shows growth, maturity, a willingness to accept guidance from those who know better." The condescension was overwhelming, but Maya forced herself to remain calm. Patricia was revealing everything Maya needed to destroy her, but only because she believed Maya was too weak and defeated to use the information effectively. "I've certainly learned a lot recently," Maya said, "about family dynamics, about how people really feel about each other, about the length some people will go to in order to maintain control." Patricia smiled, apparently interpreting Maya's words as submission rather than the threat they actually represented. "Knowledge is power, dear. The sooner you understand your place in this family, the happier everyone will be." David finally looked up from his meal, sensing tension he couldn't quite identify. "Is everything all right? You both sound so serious." "We're just having an important conversation about family relationships," Patricia replied smoothly. "Maya is finally beginning to understand how things work." "I'm definitely beginning to understand," Maya agreed, "more than you might realize." Something in Maya's tone must have alerted Patricia because her expression became more guarded. "What do you mean by that?" Maya decided it was time to reveal her hand. "I mean that I've spent the last month investigating your background, Patricia. Robert Walsh was an interesting case study. Accidental drowning, life insurance payout, suspicious family members who could never prove anything." The color drained from Patricia's face, but she recovered quickly. "I don't know what you think you've discovered. But grief makes people see conspiracies where none exist. Robert's family never accepted that his death was an accident. Just like my allergic reaction was an accident? How many accidents have followed you over the years, Patricia?"
Patricia's facade was cracking, revealing something ugly underneath. "You're being ridiculous and incredibly hurtful. I came here tonight hoping we could rebuild our relationship, and instead, you're attacking me with wild
Theories. Am I attacking you? I thought I was just asking questions. The same kind of questions a prosecutor might ask if they ever decided to investigate the pattern of convenient accidents that seem to happen around you." David was staring at both women in confusion and growing alarm. What are you talking about? What pattern of accidents? Maya turned to her father, feeling genuine pity for the man who had been Patricia's unwitting accomplice for 20 years. "Dad, when was the last time you updated your will?" "I don't see how that's relevant to this conversation," David replied, but his voice was uncertain. "Humor me. When did you last change your beneficiaries?" "About 6 months ago," David admitted reluctantly. "Patricia suggested we update our estate planning to reflect changes in tax law." "And who inherits your estate now?" David's discomfort was obvious. "Patricia is the primary beneficiary, with provisions for both you and Sophia." "What kind of provisions?" Maya pressed. "A trust fund for you, full inheritance for Sophia since she's Patricia's biological daughter." Maya nodded, pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. "So if something happened to me, my share would revert to Patricia?" "Maya, what are you suggesting?" David's voice was sharp with sudden concern. "I'm suggesting that your wife has been planning my death for months, possibly years. The wedding cake was just her first attempt." The accusation hung in the air like a physical presence. Patricia had gone completely still, her face a mask of controlled fury. David looked like he'd been struck, his mouth opening and closing without sound. "That's enough," Patricia said quietly, her voice deadly calm. "You've gone too far, Maya." "Have I? Or have I finally gone far enough? For the first time in 20 years, have I finally stood up to you in a way that actually threatens your plans?" Patricia stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the restaurant floor. "David, we're leaving. I won't sit here and listen to these sick fantasies any longer." But David remained seated, staring at Maya with dawning horror. "The wedding cake. You really think Patricia?" "I think Patricia saw an opportunity to remove an obstacle to her complete control over your estate," Maya said. "I think she's been planning this for a long time, and I think the only reason I'm still alive is that she underestimated how much shellfish protein would be needed to kill me, rather than just make me sick." Patricia's control finally snapped completely. "You ungrateful little bitch," she hissed, her voice carrying clearly in the restaurant's quiet atmosphere. "Do you have any idea what I've sacrificed for this family? What I've had to do to keep everything together? Tell me, what have you had to do, Patricia? I've protected this family from disruption, from complications that could have destroyed everything we've built. Your father was a mess when I met him, consumed with grief and guilt over your mother's death. He couldn't even take care of you properly, let alone himself." David looked stricken. "Patricia, stop! You're not helping yourself." "Helping myself? I've spent 20 years helping everyone else, making the hard choices that nobody else was willing to make, and this is the thanks I get?" "What hard choices?" Maya asked, pressing her advantage. "Choices about what was best for the family's future? Choices about removing obstacles that threatened our stability and security? Like Robert Walsh? Like me?" Patricia's face twisted with rage and something like pride. "Robert was going to leave me with nothing. He thought he could discard me after I had given him the best years of my life, after I had raised his daughter as my own. He learned differently." The confession was everything Maya had hoped for and more. Patricia had just admitted to murdering her first husband in front of multiple witnesses, including an attorney and a hidden recording device. David stood up slowly, his face pale with shock and disbelief. "Patricia, what are you saying?"
I'm saying that I've always done what was necessary to protect our
family, Patricia replied, apparently beyond caring about the consequences of her words. Robert, Maya's little accidents, all of it was about ensuring our security and removing threats to our happiness. Accidents? David's voice was barely a whisper. What accidents? The wedding cake was just the beginning, Patricia said, her mask of sanity completely gone now. If Maya had been smart enough to take the hint and disappear from our lives, it wouldn't have been necessary to escalate. But she insisted on making trouble, on asking questions, on threatening everything I've worked to build. Maya felt a cold terror wash over her as she realized Patricia was confessing to much more than past crimes. She was revealing ongoing plans, current threats that Maya hadn't even suspected. "What were you planning to do?" Maya asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to hear the answer. "Whatever was necessary," Patricia replied. "Car accidents are so common in Chicago traffic. Home invasions happen all the time in Lincoln Park. Young women living alone face so many dangers." James had been silent through most of the confrontation, but now he spoke up, his voice tight with controlled anger. "You're talking about murdering my wife." "I'm talking about protecting my family," Patricia shot back. "Maya chose to make herself a threat. I was simply planning to neutralize that threat permanently." The restaurant had gone completely quiet around them, other diners openly staring at the dramatic scene unfolding at their table. Maya could see the maitre d' approaching with security personnel, clearly concerned about the disturbance. David sank back into his chair, looking like he'd aged 10 years in the space of minutes. 20 years, he said, his voice broken. 20 years of marriage, and I never knew who you really were. You knew exactly who I was. You knew I was the woman who saved you from your grief, who gave you stability and purpose, who managed your household and raised your difficult daughter. You just chose to not ask too many questions about how I accomplished those things. The accusation hit David like a physical blow. Maya could see him reviewing 20 years of marriage through this new lens, recognizing all the warning signs he'd chosen to ignore or rationalize away. "The police are on their way," the maitre d' announced quietly, having approached their table during Patricia's confession. "I'm going to have to ask you to remain seated until they arrive." Patricia looked around the restaurant as if seeing it clearly for the first time, realizing that she'd just confessed to multiple felonies in front of dozens of witnesses. The confident predator who had been gloating about her crimes moments earlier was replaced by a trapped animal looking for an escape route. "This was a setup," she said, turning to Maya with genuine hatred in her eyes. "You planned this whole evening to trick me into saying things that could be taken out of context." "I planned to give you enough rope to hang yourself," Maya replied. "And you took it willingly because you couldn't resist the opportunity to gloat about how much smarter you think you are than everyone else." "Those weren't confessions," Patricia said desperately. "I was speaking hypothetically, trying to make you understand how your paranoid accusations sounded to rational people. But the explanation was too late and too obviously false. Too many people had heard her detailed descriptions of past murders and future plans. The recording device had captured every word, and Rachel Morrison was already approaching their table, with her attorney credentials visible. "Patricia Chen," Rachel said formally, "I'm an officer of the court, and I've just witnessed you confess to multiple felonies, including murder and conspiracy to commit murder. I strongly advise you to remain silent until you can consult with legal counsel." David looked between his wife and his daughter, clearly struggling to process the magnitude of what had just been revealed. "Maya, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. If I had known—" "You didn't want to know," Maya replied.
Unkindly, you wanted to believe that Patricia was making everything better, and it was easier to ignore the warning signs than to confront the truth. The police arrived within minutes, surrounding their table with professional efficiency. Patricia was read her rights and taken into custody, while the other diners watched in stunned silence. Maya gave a preliminary statement to the investigating officers, providing them with copies of her research into Patricia's background and the recording of the evening's conversation. David was questioned separately, his shock and confusion evident to everyone present. When the officers asked if he had suspected his wife of criminal activity, he broke down completely, admitting that he'd chosen to rationalize away years of suspicious behavior because the alternative was too terrible to contemplate.
She made our life so easy, he sobbed to Maya as they waited for the police to finish processing the scene. She handled everything, managed everything, took care of everything. I convinced myself that you were just having normal adjustment problems with the stepmother. Maya felt a complex mix of emotions watching her father's breakdown. Part of her wanted to comfort him, to absolve him of responsibility for Patricia's crimes, but a larger part of her recognized that his willful blindness had enabled Patricia's behavior for 20 years, had given her the cover she needed to terrorize Maya and potentially murder others. "Dad," she said gently, "Patricia fooled a lot of people. She was very good at appearing normal while hiding her true nature, but I need you to understand that your choice to ignore the warning signs put me in danger for my entire childhood and young adulthood." David nodded miserably. I know, and I'll have to live with that for the rest of my life. Is there any way you can forgive me?" Maya considered the question seriously. "I can forgive you," she said finally. "But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting what happened or pretending it didn't matter. It means I'm choosing to move forward without carrying hatred for you. But it also means our relationship going forward will have to be different." "Different how?" "Honest," Maya said. "No more pretending things are fine when they're not. No more ignoring problems because they're uncomfortable to address. No more assuming that keeping peace is more important than protecting the people you love." David agreed readily, clearly desperate to rebuild some kind of relationship with the daughter he'd failed to protect. Maya knew it would take time to determine whether his remorse was genuine and lasting or just another form of avoidance that would fade once the immediate crisis passed. The legal proceedings that followed were swift and decisive. Patricia's recorded confession, combined with Maya's research into her background and the physical evidence from the wedding cake incident, built an overwhelming case against her. The district attorney filed charges of attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and murder in the first degree for Robert Walsh's death. Patricia's attorney attempted to argue that her statements at the restaurant had been taken out of context, that she'd been speaking hypothetically rather than confessing to actual crimes. But the recording was too clear, too detailed, and too obviously genuine for the argument to gain any traction. During the trial preparation, additional evidence emerged that strengthened the prosecution's case. Forensic examination of Robert Walsh's boat revealed traces of sedatives that had been dismissed as inconclusive at the time of his death. Financial records showed that Patricia had researched life insurance policies and beneficiary laws extensively in the months before Robert's death. Most damning of all, investigators discovered that Patricia had purchased crab extract from a specialty food supplier just days before Maya's wedding, claiming she needed it for a recipe she was developing. The purchase had been made with cash and under a false name, but security cameras and the supplier's records provided a clear trail of evidence. Sophia was arrested as an accessory after the fact.
Investigators discovered text messages between her and Patricia discussing plans to solve the Maya problem permanently. The messages revealed that Sophia had been aware of her mother's murderous intentions and had helped scout Maya's apartment building and daily routines. The betrayal by her half-sister cut deeply, even though Maya had known that Sophia was complicit in Patricia's schemes. To see the extent of Sophia's involvement, to realize that the young woman she'd tried to protect and understand had been actively planning her death, was almost harder to accept than Patricia's original crimes. The trial itself was a media sensation, drawing attention from across the country as details of Patricia's crimes and manipulations were revealed in court. Maya testified for 3 days, describing 20 years of psychological abuse and the events leading up to the wedding cake poisoning. Her testimony was calm, detailed, and devastating. James also testified, describing the dinner conversation where Patricia had confessed to her crimes. His account corroborated Maya's testimony perfectly, and the recording device provided audio evidence that left no room for doubt about Patricia's guilt. David's testimony was perhaps the most damaging to Patricia's defense. As he described 20 years of marriage to a woman he now realized was a calculating murderer, his genuine shock and horror were evident to everyone in the courtroom. His admission that he'd ignored warning signs because he didn't want to confront difficult truths painted a picture of Patricia as a master manipulator who had fooled even her closest victim. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges. Patricia was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for Robert Walsh's murder, with additional consecutive sentences for the attempted murder of Maya and conspiracy charges. Sophia received a lighter sentence in exchange for her cooperation with the prosecution, but she would still spend several years in prison for her role in the conspiracy. Maya felt no satisfaction in her half-sister's conviction, only sadness for the young woman who had been raised to believe that murder was an acceptable solution to family problems. The aftermath of the trial was both liberating and overwhelming. Maya found herself processing 20 years of trauma that she'd suppressed or rationalized away. The knowledge that Patricia had been planning her death for months, possibly years, recontextualized every interaction they'd had during that period. Therapy became essential as Maya worked through the complex emotions surrounding her stepmother's crimes. The therapist helped her understand that Patricia's behavior had never been Maya's fault, that no amount of compliance or accommodation would have satisfied someone with Patricia's psychological profile. Predators like Patricia don't target people because of what they've done wrong, the therapist explained. They target people because of what they represent or because they're obstacles to what the predator wants. You could have been perfect, and she still would have seen you as a threat to her control over your father. The insight was both comforting and terrifying. It meant that Maya could stop blaming herself for Patricia's treatment, but it also meant that Patricia's crimes had been inevitable from the moment she decided Maya was expendable. David sought therapy as well, struggling to process his role in enabling Patricia's behavior. The revelation that his wife had been a murderer forced him to confront his own failings as a father and husband. The guilt was overwhelming, and there were times when Maya worried he might not survive the emotional trauma.
Months after the trial, an unexpected development changed everything. Maya received a call from a woman who identified herself as federal judge Margaret Chen, asking if they could meet to discuss a matter of mutual interest. The woman's last name was intriguing, but Maya assumed it was coincidental until she did some research and discovered that Judge Chen had been following the trial closely. The meeting took place in Judge Chen's chambers, a dignified space filled with law books and family photographs. The judge was an elegant woman in her 60s, with kind eyes and an authoritative presence that commanded immediate respect. "Thank you for coming," Judge Chen said, gesturing for Maya to take a seat across from her desk. "I know this request must seem unusual, but I believe we have more in common than you might realize." "I'm not sure I understand," Maya replied, studying the judge's face for clues. Judge Chen picked up a photograph from her desk, studying it for a moment before handing it to Maya. The image showed a young woman who looked remarkably similar to Maya, holding a baby in her arms. "That's my daughter, Elizabeth," Judge Chen said quietly. "She was 22 when that photo was taken, just before she gave birth to a baby girl. 6 months later, Elizabeth was killed in a car accident. The baby disappeared into the foster care system, and despite my best efforts, I was never able to find her." Maya stared at the photograph, her mind racing as the implications became clear. "When was this taken?" 27 years ago. Elizabeth was in college, unmarried, and had been planning to give the baby up to adoption. After her death, there was confusion about the paperwork, bureaucratic mistakes that made it nearly impossible to track what happened to the child. "Why are you telling me this?" Judge Chen leaned forward, her eyes intense, but kind. "Because I've been searching for my granddaughter for 27 years, and I believe that granddaughter is you." The words hit Maya like a physical blow. She stared at the photograph again, seeing the unmistakable resemblance between herself and the young woman holding the baby. The timeline matched perfectly with Maya's adoption story. The bureaucratic confusion that Judge Chen described aligned with the limited information Maya had about her early placement. "I don't understand," Maya said weakly. "I was told my mother died in a car accident when I was 6.
David Chen adopted me when he married Patricia. David Chen isn't your biological father, Judge Chen said gently. He's a kind man who married a woman named Patricia Walsh, who had somehow acquired custody of a 6-year-old girl with no legal documentation of how that custody was obtained. Maya felt the world tilting around her as the truth began to emerge. Patricia took me from the foster system? Patricia worked as a nurse in the hospital where Elizabeth died. She had access to records, to information about Elizabeth's baby. I believe she saw an opportunity to acquire a child who could help her appear more sympathetic to potential husband targets. The revelation recontextualized Maya's entire life. She hadn't been the David Chen's biological daughter, struggling with a difficult stepmother. She'd been a kidnapped child being held by the woman who had stolen her from her real family. Why didn't you find me sooner? I tried, Judge Chen said, her voice breaking slightly. But Patricia was very clever about covering her tracks. She created false documents, claimed you were the daughter of a deceased friend, built an entire fabricated history that was difficult to challenge without concrete proof. What changed? Why now? The trial. When Patricia's background was investigated for the murder charges, inconsistencies emerged in her story about how she acquired custody of you. The prosecutor shared those inconsistencies with me when he learned I'd been searching for a missing granddaughter. Maya stared at the photograph again, trying to process
The magnitude of what she was learning. So David isn't my father, Patricia kidnapped me from foster care, and you're my real grandmother? That's what DNA testing will tell us for certain, Judge Chen said. But I believe with every fiber of my being that you're Elizabeth's daughter. You have her eyes, her expressions, her stubborn determination to fight for what's right. The DNA test results, obtained a week later, confirmed what Judge Chen already knew. Maya Chen was actually Maya Walsh, the granddaughter Judge Margaret Chen had been searching for since Elizabeth's death 27 years earlier. The legal implications were staggering. Patricia had committed kidnapping in addition to her murder charges, adding federal crimes to her already lengthy prison sentence. More importantly for Maya, she finally had answers to questions that had haunted her entire life. Meeting her biological grandmother was both wonderful and overwhelming. Judge Chen was everything Maya had hoped for in a family member: intelligent, kind, and fiercely protective. She filled in the gaps in Maya's family history, sharing stories about Elizabeth and the extended family Maya had never known existed. Elizabeth would be so proud of you, Judge Chen said during one of their long conversations. She was studying journalism too, planning to be an investigative reporter. She had your same determination to expose the truth, regardless of how uncomfortable it made people. Maya felt a deep sense of connection to the mother she'd never known, understanding for the first time where her drive for justice and truth had originated. It wasn't something she developed in response to Patricia's abuse, but something she'd inherited from Elizabeth's DNA and spirit. David's reaction to the revelation was complex and painful. Learning that Maya wasn't his biological daughter didn't diminish his love for her, but it forced him to confront the fact that his entire marriage had been built on a foundation of lies and crimes. Patricia had used Maya as bait to attract him, presenting herself as a devoted single mother struggling to raise a difficult child. I loved you as my own daughter from the moment I met you, David told Maya tearfully. That will never change, regardless of biology. But I'm horrified to realize that my marriage to Patricia was based on her kidnapping you in the first place. Maya struggled with her feelings toward David, the man who had raised her with genuine love, but had unknowingly been complicit in her kidnapping. She eventually decided that David had been as much a victim of Patricia's manipulations as she had been, targeted specifically because he was the kind of man who would love and protect a vulnerable child. You saved me, she told him during one of their conversations. Maybe not from the foster system like Patricia claimed, but from Patricia herself. If you hadn't genuinely loved me, if you hadn't provided stability and education and opportunities, I might never have survived long enough to escape her completely.
James's reaction to the revelations was characteristically supportive. "I fell in love with Maya Walsh, or Maya Chen, or whatever name you want to use," he said simply. "The woman I married hasn't changed, even if the story of how she got to be that woman is different than we thought."
Death and worried about her missing child celebrated Maya's return with joy and gratitude. The wedding Maya and James had never properly celebrated was finally held 6 months later, with Judge Chen officiating and David walking Maya down the aisle. The ceremony was everything the first had been meant to be, filled with people who genuinely loved and supported them, rather than an audience that included potential murderers. Maya's career flourished in the aftermath of the trial and revelations. Her investigative skills, honed through years of surviving Patricia's manipulation, made her an exceptional journalist. She won several awards for her reporting on corruption and abuse of power, using her platform to help other victims find their voices. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.